2,500 years ago, Persian kings guarded a narrow sea gate at the edge of their empire. 500 years later, merchants called it the richest trading crossroads on Earth. In the 1500s, Portuguese warships arrived with cannons and seized it. In the 1800s, the British Empire turned it into the most heavily policed waterway in the Middle East. In the 1980s, missiles and mines turned it into a battlefield where oil tankers were literally blown out of the water. And today, in 2026, the world is once again asking the same question it has asked for centuries. What happens if this passage closes? Because this thin strip of ocean, the Strait of Hormuz, is not just another shipping lane, it is the single most important energy choke point on the planet. Before we go back in history, you need to understand what exactly we're talking about, and because the geography here is almost unbelievably extreme. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway sitting between Iran to the north and Oman and the UAE to the south. It is the only sea exit from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. There is no other way out. Now picture this: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Iran. Together, these countries hold more than half of all the oil reserves on the planet, and every single barrel of oil they export by sea must pass through this one channel. At its narrowest navigable point, the actual shipping lanes are just 4 nautical miles wide. 2 lanes, one going in, one going out. That's it. As of 2025, around 20 million barrels of oil pass through here every single day. That's roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply, plus 20% of all global liquefied natural gas. Every single day, about 100 ships, through a gap barely wider than a few city blocks. Japan gets 95% of its crude oil from the Middle East, and most of it comes through this strait. South Korea, 68%. China, roughly a third of all its oil imports. This is why military strategists call it a choke point. Block it, and you don't just hurt one country. You hurt the entire world simultaneously. And Iran knows this. Iran has always known this. But to understand why Iran has this power and why it has always been contested, we need to go back, way back. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a comment of the truth you will love to know. Let's move forward. The name Hormuz itself comes from ancient Persian, most likely derived from Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of the Zoroastrian faith, the god of wisdom, light, and cosmic order. Even 2,500 years ago, people understood this waterway was something sacred, something central. In the ancient world, long before oil was ever drilled, the Persian Gulf was the highway of civilization. Think about what traveled through here: silk from China, spices from India, cinnamon, pepper, cardamom, pearls and coral from the Gulf itself, horses going east, cotton going west, gold, ivory, incense. The early Mughal Emperor Babur wrote in his memoirs about almonds being carried all the way from Central Asia to reach the markets here. Whoever sat at the mouth of this waterway could tax every single one of those goods. They could say, "You want to trade with Persia, with India, with Arabia? Pay us, or we stop you." It was the world's first great toll road, and it was made of water. By the 13th century, a remarkable medieval kingdom had emerged right here. The Kingdom of Hormuz, centered on a small island at the mouth of the strait. Hormuz Island. Medieval travelers described it as one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. Marco Polo visited. Ibn Battuta visited. They wrote of merchants from India, Persia, Arabia, China, and East Africa, all crowded together in its bazaars. Persians, Arabs, Jews, Christians, Hindus, all trading side by side. The city was so wealthy it attracted raiders, pirates, and eventually empires. And the first great empire to come from outside the region arrived in the 1507, and they changed everything. In 1507, a Portuguese admiral named Afonso de Albuquerque sailed into the Persian Gulf with a fleet of warships. Albuquerque was arguably the most brilliant naval strategist of the Age of Discovery. He had one vision: dominate Asian trade by seizing its choke points. He had already taken Goa on the Indian coast. Now he came for Hormuz. He looked at the map and immediately understood the logic. Whoever controls Hormuz controls the trade between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean world. By 1515, the Portuguese had built a massive fortress on Hormuz Island. They set up what historians describe as a toll gate system for Asian commerce. Every ship that wanted to pass, pay a fee or be sunk. They even created a system of protection documents called cartazas, essentially licenses that friendly ships carried to avoid Portuguese attack. It was, to put it bluntly, a protection racket built on naval supremacy. The Portuguese dominated this region for over a century, but they were not unchallenged. The Ottoman Empire, the other great power of the era, launched 3 major naval expeditions trying to take Hormuz away from the Portuguese in the 1550s. All 3 failed. Then in 1622, something remarkable happened. The Persian Safavid Emperor Shah Abbas the Great formed an unlikely alliance with the English East India Company of all people and expelled the Portuguese from their fortress. The strategic logic didn't disappear, it simply changed hands. The Dutch came next, then the British. And the British transformed the entire equation because they didn't just want the trade routes. They wanted the land, the oil, the empire. Through the 1800s, the British Empire steadily extended its control over the Persian Gulf. They signed treaties with the Arab sheikhs along the coast and the same territories that are today the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait. These became known as the Trucial States because of the truces signed with Britain. Britain's stated purpose was to suppress piracy and protect trade. The real purpose was to keep rival European powers, France, Russia, later Germany, out of the region. But everything changed in 1908. That year, British engineers drilling in southwest Persia struck oil, the first major oil discovery in the Middle East. Suddenly, the Persian Gulf was not just a trade route, it was the energy source of the modern world. In 1914, Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, converted the Royal Navy from coal to oil. Britain's ability to project naval power globally now depended on oil from Persia flowing through the Persian Gulf and out through Hormuz. The entire logic of the British Empire in the Middle East shifted. This was no longer about trade taxes. This was about the fuel that ran tanks, ships, aircraft, and factories. World War I, World War II, Korea, Suez. Every major conflict of the 20th century had the Persian Gulf and its choke point somewhere in its strategic calculations. And then in 1971, something happened that would reshape everything. Britain announced it was withdrawing from east of Suez, pulling its military forces out of the Persian Gulf entirely. Into that vacuum stepped 2 powers, Iran under the Shah and Saudi Arabia, and watching very closely from the other side of the world, the United States. In 1979, everything the West had built in the Persian Gulf collapsed almost overnight. The Iranian Revolution overthrew Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, America's key ally in the Gulf, and brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power. Suddenly, the country that sat on the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz was led by a government that called America the Great Satan. Then in September 1980, Iraqi President Saddam Hussein launched a full-scale invasion of Iran. He expected a quick victory. He got 8 years of the bloodiest war since World War II, and the war came to the Strait. In 1981, Iraq declared that all ships heading to Iranian ports were targets. Their warplanes began hitting oil tankers. Iran retaliated, targeting ships supplying Iraq's allies, especially Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. This became known as the Tanker War, and it was exactly what it sounds like. Between 1981 and 1988, over 400 civilian merchant ships were attacked in the Persian Gulf. 239 of them were oil tankers. Sailors were killed. Ships were set on fire. The Persian Gulf became the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth. Iran deployed a terrifying weapon, naval mines, cheap, deadly, almost impossible to detect. They scattered them in the waters around the strait. In April 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, an American warship, hit one of those mines. The explosion shattered its keel, flooded its engine room, and nearly destroyed the ship. 10 sailors were seriously wounded. America's response was swift and brutal. Operation Praying Mantis, the largest American naval battle since World War II. In a single day, the U.S. Navy sank or crippled a significant portion of Iran's naval fleet. But here's the critical lesson from the tanker war that still echoes in 2026, even under sustained military attack. Even with hundreds of ships burning and mines in the water, the oil kept flowing. The Strait was never fully closed until now. After the Iran-Iraq war ended, the world spent the next 3 decades trying to manage the threat of Hormuz being closed without ever solving it. Saudi Arabia built its east-west pipeline in the early 1980s, a direct response to the tanker war, specifically so it could bypass the Strait and export oil to the Red Sea. The UAE built its own Habshan-Fujairah pipeline for the same reason. These pipelines can move about 3 to 5 million barrels a day. Sounds like a lot, but the Strait handles 20 million barrels a day. The pipelines are a partial hedge, not a solution. In the 1990s and 2000s, as Iran's nuclear program advanced, the threat cycles intensified. Iran repeatedly warned it could close the Strait if attacked. In 2012, oil prices spiked dramatically just from the rhetoric alone. In 2019, mysterious explosions hit oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman near the Strait. Iran-linked forces were blamed. Oil prices spiked again. In June 2025, just months before this video, the United States struck Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran's parliament immediately voted to authorize closing the Strait. They held back. That time. The next time, they didn't. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran in an operation called Epic Fury. Targets included Iran's nuclear sites, its military facilities, and Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed. Iran's response came immediately. Iranian warships attacked tankers near the Strait. 3 tankers were struck and set ablaze on that first night. By March 1st and 2nd, no ships were moving through the channel at all. The IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, officially declared the Strait closed. The world's largest shipping companies halted all transits. Insurance for ships trying to pass became effectively unavailable. Over 150 ships anchored outside the Strait, waiting. More than 15 million barrels of oil per day, stranded in the Persian Gulf. Brent crude surged above $126 a barrel within days. Natural gas prices spiked nearly 70%. LNG freight rates jumped 40% in a single trading session. Japan, which gets 95% of its crude from the Middle East, went into emergency energy planning mode. South Korea, India, China, the entire industrialized world suddenly confronted what strategists had warned about for decades: the complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and now Iran is reportedly mining the Strait itself, using the same weapon it used in the 1980s. Cheap contact mines that can disable a billion-dollar warship or supertanker in seconds. The U.S. has reportedly destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels. But mines already in the water, those could take weeks, possibly months, to clear. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the killed leader, has vowed to keep the Strait closed. History has not changed. The geography has not changed. Only the weapons have. So what happens if this doesn't resolve? Let's be direct about the stakes. Every day the Strait is closed, 15 to 20 million barrels of oil that should be moving to Asia, Europe, and beyond stays trapped. The world's strategic reserves can compensate for weeks, maybe a couple of months, not indefinitely. Japan, South Korea, and China face the most immediate crisis. Japan sources nearly all of its crude through this passage. For these countries, a prolonged closure doesn't just mean higher fuel prices. It means potential energy rationing, factory shutdowns, economic contraction. For the global economy broadly, oil above $100 and heading higher means inflation roars back. The supply chains that were already fragile from previous crises get hit again. The United States faces a brutal choice: begin escorting tankers through a mined, missile-threatened strait, risking American ships and lives, or wait and watch the global economy deteriorate by the day. And Iran? Iran is betting that the pain it can inflict on the world economy outweighs the pain it is suffering from the strikes that destroyed its military and nuclear infrastructure. It is a gamble that only makes sense if you understand 2,500 years of history. Iran has watched every outside power that came to dominate this strait. The Portuguese, the British, the Americans eventually leave. They believe geography is on their side. Time is on their side. The strait will outlast every empire that tries to control it. That is what Afonso de Albuquerque understood in 1507, what Shah Abbas understood in 1622, what every strategist has understood ever since. Whoever controls those 21 miles controls the world. We started this video with a crisis, ships on fire, oil at $100, the world holding its breath. But now you understand something that most people watching the news do not. This is not a new story. This is the oldest story in the world. For 2,500 years, the Strait of Hormuz has been the place where civilizations collide, where empires are tested, where the question, who controls access to the world's most vital resources, gets answered by force. The Persians, the Arabs, the Portuguese, the Ottomans, the British, the Americans. They all came here. They all fought here. In one way or another, they all eventually had to reckon with the same reality. You cannot change the geography. Those 21 miles of water will be here long after every one of these empires is turned to dust. The only question, the question being asked right now in Washington, in Tehran, in Tokyo, in Beijing, is who will control them next? If this video helped you understand a story that the world is living through right now, consider subscribing, because this crisis is not over, and there is much more history left to be made. I'll see you in the next one.